there are certain things that people look for when they're going to different genres. I mean, if you go to the murder mystery genre, you want a murder and a mystery, and you want the solution of that. You want the puzzle solving of the crime aspect of it. You go to a fantasy or a fantasy world, and you want to know, what are the cultures like? What are the different areas, and how are they unique from each other? What culture clashes are there between different races, elves and dwarves, or gnomes and humans? And most importantly, you got magic in there. How does magic work? So that's
Right.
why I loved the Robert Jordan conception of it. Well, there's this universal flow that's very yin yang, male female half, and you channel this power through you, and it's got the traditional five, earth, wind, and fire type of stuff going on with spirit
Right.
and whatnot. Those explanations are brilliant. I don't know if you want to say how your system works, or if you want to keep it a mystery to people, because that is part of the story, is learning that.
No, no, I think that would be fine. So, in part, the there's a conjurer's tongue. It's a language learned by wizards and sorcerers within the realm that they're able to use to conjure magic, with for themselves. But there's also a magic that comes with, like the veneration of the gods, right? So I've
Mm-hmm.
created a pantheon of gods, very similar to maybe Greek or Roman, where or Nordic, where you're seeing dozens or 2 dozens worth of what I call ancients. And if you pray to them and sacrifice to them in the same way that folks in medieval societies have done, they will imbue upon you the magics that you need. So there's this magic that comes from veneration, and there's also this magic that comes from this mysterious conjurer's tongue.
That very cool. I think it's a very important element, and
Thanks.
no, yeah, and I can see the inspiration without duplication of my own journey as well through the different fantasy systems,
Hmm.
specifically D&D, and I've always loved how that worked. I don't know if you, I mean, I haven't played in a long time, but this was back in the late '90s probably. We always gave over the memorization system for more of a spell point system, where we
Yeah.
didn't want to be like, I got to wake up in the morning and decide how many healing spells do I need, how many times do I want to transmute mud to rock. But it's like, look, you get 10 spell points because your first level, you can cast, they each cost a different amount. It always reminded me of more of like a video game style, where it uses a chunk of your mana bar, and it gets kind of
Yep.
regenerate over time. I was always more of a big fan of that kind of a system in the role playing genre.
Yeah, and I think you've seen the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons migrate from what was the old way, which is a wizard opens a book and studies it for 4 hours and regains their spells in the morning, to a spell point system that when Wizards of the Coast bought TSR, the idea was, how can we get fans of Magic the Gathering integrated into a role playing game? And what they did was they used the same kind of concept that you're describing right now, which is, I'm going to use my spell points. And those spell points are going to be, and I can use them to empower a spell. So even though it might be a lesser spell, like a magic missile, to use a Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah,
term,
yeah.
you can cast it at a higher level because you're using more of your spell points on it. And so
That's a
those
cool
things have
concept.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so, yeah, and I've seen that from like advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the '90s, all the way through fifth edition today. And I think those things exist. And what I've tried to do was make it, ubiquitous. Anybody there are folks that can learn it, and there are folks that can pray for it, and there's folks that are born with it. And so that to use another kind of RPG term, it's the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer. A
Mm.
wizard is someone who's going to learn it. There's a scholar, as opposed to someone who is born with this wild magic within them that they can conjure from time to time, but they really don't know how to use it. They almost have to channel it through themselves. Kind of like, Star Wars, uses the Force, or your example with Robert Jordan using, the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, and then sometimes time.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that they find interesting, and how they can kind of move the needle with their stuff. So that's what
Yeah,
makes it a little different in my world.
for sure. Yeah, when you gotta make it distinguish. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to write a book. I've got an idea, and every time I sat down to write it, here's a funny thing you could maybe talk about being an author is, what stopped me was the idea, the outline, the kind of a lot of the concepts involved are very inspired as far as I'm concerned, in terms of, I find them interesting. Go to sit down to write, and it comes out like I get bored with the process. I look at it and I can't tell whether what I've written is good or not, because I'm bored writing it and I'm thinking someone's going to be bored reading it, but maybe it's just because I know what I'm saying and it's not new to me. I'm not reading it for the first time. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, or if that's a block a lot of writers face, or if I'm describing something
Well,
that's
no, no, no. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a couple of things in there, right? The first is being willing to share your stuff, right? A lot of writers have a tendency to be introverted, and therefore they don't like to open the door and let people in and criticize their stuff.
yeah.
They
What if
think that what
everybody
they've
hates it?
written,
Oh,
right? Yeah. What if?
yeah,
But being a good writer means being open to constructive criticism,
yeah.
and what my publisher has done, or other folks I've worked with in this business, is they set you up, or you find beta readers, people that you trust, that are not going to be your mom, that are going to tell you, oh, it's so great, honey, and
Right.
and meanwhile it stinks. You need someone that can be honest with you about reviewing your stuff, and then telling you what they think. Doing, it's saying, hey, look, this doesn't work, or there's a plot hole here, or why didn't they do this, or I missed that, and you fell
Mm-hmm.
asleep during, like, you brushed over it because, and you thought it was important, and you found out that you didn't write it well enough, right?
Mm,
And so it's those bits of constructive. And I tell people, it's just like going to a movie theater and getting, when they're testing a movie, they show three different endings, and then
yeah,
the one
yeah.
that's most popular they choose. Or same thing with product placement for marketing and advertising. They have focus groups, and they want to make sure that their product, that is something that jumps out at you and something you'd pick off the shelf, and they're going to want to know. And in my business, that's the cover. You know what I mean? It's not what's in the book. It's with that first glance where you grab the book and look at it, and then you turn it over and read the blurb before you decide to buy it, right? And it's
Yeah.
those two acts. How do you summarize an epic fantasy of 500 plus pages with one book cover and 150 words on the back? It's hard to do, right? So, and I think that's what people, stop people, right? And I think the other side of it is really, it's really being dedicated to it. If you're going to be a writer, you're going to have to write in some form or fashion every day. And I don't
You
mean
gotta just do it.
like 10 chapters a day. What I'm talking about is really a handful of chapters, or one paragraph with an outline for the next, or rereading something to make it better, and editing your own stuff. Those kind of things become a bit of muscle memory, and therefore as you do it, you'll become more confident with it. And then as you share it with people to read, you're going to get their opinions, and hopefully they're honest and constructive, and then you could take that back and really kind of apply it to your work as it is.
Good deal. And that, so do you tend to write from an outline, or kind of start a chapter and
Oh
then
yeah,
just see where it takes you?
I am a dungeon master, right? And a dungeon
Gotcha.
master has to have a plan, right?
You
So
got to
you
have the
have,
ending in mind, and the contingencies,
yeah,
and
you start with the ending, and you work your way to the beginning, and you find, places in the middle where characters are going to level up. And the same thing happens with the book, right? You have to pace it properly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
unlike a game where you're breaking it up over a 4-hour period, and you don't see someone for another week or so, this is something that someone could read through if they wanted to. So it has to be paced appropriately. There's no rush in things. You're not going and you meet the enemy right away, and there's this big epic battle. It's got to be paced in the same way you would pace a campaign for Dungeons and Dragons, group, or for another role playing game.